Okay, I am having a wonderful chat already with Nicholas Daniel, oboist with Camerata Pacifica, among a million other things. I am in Santa Barbara. It's a beautiful, gorgeous, sunny afternoon, and Nick is near Cambridge. It's dark. We're
It's
talking eight.
dark and it's getting down towards freezing.
Oh, still, wow. I
Yeah,
had
well,
for,
the daytimes are now much warmer, but
yeah.
the evenings are still cold. My daffodils are not happy about it.
and I had forgotten. I had blocked the weather out of my student days in London in memory. We are talking about we're going to chat a little bit about the upcoming Camerata Pacifica concert set. It's coming up in April, and I'm going to we're going to talk about the Santa Barbara performances because, of course, I'm in Santa Barbara and I want to address the Santa Barbara audience. But because a lot of people watch this, my little video interviews here throughout Southern California. I'm going to give you all the dates. So let me get that out of the way up front. You can take a nap, Nick, and I'll get this done. We're talking about Camerata Pacifica, Adrian Spence, artistic director and magical person, if I may say so. Fabulous, probably really, literally world class. We'll talk about that in a minute, Nick. World class musicians involved. Here's the schedule for their April set of concerts. And this is really a charming concert. Whoever set this one up, it's a beauty. Probably Adrian, but we'll speak about that too because there are some Brits involved in this programming. Sunday, April 6th in Ventura, Camerata Pacifica. Tuesday, April 8th in Pasadena. Thursday, April 10th in Los Angeles at the Zipper Hall, the fabulous, gorgeous Zipper Hall. And then Friday, April 11th in Santa Barbara. And there'll be two events, as those of you in Santa Barbara know. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, April 11th at Hahn Hall at the Music Academy of the West, a kind of a shorter program. And then at 7:30 that evening, Friday, April 11th at Hahn Hall, the full program. And here's the fascinating, as always, program. We've got Jake Heggie, an American, a soliloquy for solo and piano, flute and piano. We have Thea Musgrave, and she taught out at UCSB as head of composition at UCSB for many, many years. And an amazing piece. Let me see if I can find it here in my notes. It's for flute and digital delay. I've forgotten the title. We can talk about that a little bit.
Narcissus.
Oh, Narcissus. Yes, one of her most famous. Now that I think about it, Narcissus. I think that rings big bells. Anywho, and then and Thea Musgrave is Scottish. I learned at the 11th hour to save me. Then two really wonderful British composers, Herbert Howells, his oboe sonata, with ours truly, Nick Daniel as the featured oboist, and Madeleine Dring. And I had never heard of this amazing, marvelous woman. I'll want to spend a little. You had a bright light there for a minute, and then it went out. So if anything changes, whatever. We'll deal with it. Anywho, there it goes, on and off again. Madeleine Dring, and this woman's trio for flute, oboe, and piano. I do want to spend a minute or two with you on discussing. And then, of course, we've got Mozart. Just the piano quintet of Mozart. This is one of his most charming wind and piano pieces, I think. So that's the program. Jake Heggie, Thea Musgrave, Herbert Howells, Madeleine Dring, and Wolfgang. And perhaps a lot of people are saying, who are they? I know one of them, they're saying, perhaps. And this, I'm giving this preamble because I think it's very important. This is exactly the mission of Adrian Spence. First, get an audience trust, and then give them real, meaty, juicy, wonderful, exciting repertoire. So, can I call you Nick? I know Nick Ormrod in Britain, and Nicholas is just too many syllables. Is that okay?
I'm going to Nicholas when I'm written.
There you
So
go.
Nick is
Okay.
fine. Thank you so much.
All right. I'm Dan, of course. I have the
Yes.
same problem. It's Daniel when it's written out formally.
Exactly.
Everybody calls me Dan.
very good.
Anyway, Nick Daniel is not only okay. We're going to say this, possibly, maybe even, at least one of the best oboists in the world, and this is no kidding. I've watched this guy play for some years now. An astonishing control over one of the most horrifying instruments. I'm a clarinetist, and luckily, when Richard Stoltzman said make reeds, I said, thanks very much, I'll be a conductor. Okay, that was at Cal Arts a million years ago. And oboes and bassoons, as most everybody knows, have to make their own reeds, and this is just a nightmare. I don't understand it. Let's start there, if you don't mind, which is, how could any kid suddenly become inspired at age whatever you're going to tell us with an instrument that fights you for years?
Well, it doesn't fight you if you're properly taught. That's the
Uh,
thing. And when you're little, you have instruments. The junior starter instruments are not as resistant, not as problematic, and you don't have to make your own reeds when you're little. People make them for you. It's expensive. What you need is a little bit of money, unfortunately, because it's you can't buy. You can probably buy a flute for $100. It wouldn't be brilliant, but you certainly couldn't buy an oboe for less than 10 times that. Even a starter model. This is a problem, something that some of us are trying to sort out a little bit with some of the makers in the world. But the thing is, what tends to happen with oboists is you get a kind of crazy kid, and they sort of do a bit of listening and a bit of thinking, and they go to their mum and dad. You know what? I want to play the oboe. The what? But with me, it was very different because I'd been singing in my local church choir. My parents were churchgoers, and obviously they dragged me along too. And then I sang in the church choir, and then my voice became very, very good, and I was blessed with an amazing treble voice. I'm told I haven't got any recordings of it because this was quite a long time ago. But what happened was that my mother thought it'd be an idea for me to go in for a cathedral school. So we have these incredible cathedral schools in this country, in Britain, who have resident choirs with a private school attached to it, and you get a huge chunk off the school fees, which is always nice. And in order to be a chorister, you had to learn 2 instruments. And so I played the piano from very young because my mother had given me the choice between horse riding and playing the piano, and I thought horse riding sounded a bit dangerous.
You are a nerd, aren't you? Jeez.
So I took up the piano, and then my dad didn't know what other instrument to play. My grandmother said the boy must play the oboe. So Granny was kind of wonderful, very, very sweet, gentle, loving, but quite commanding person. So the boy took up the oboe, and he did very well very quickly. And it just seemed to me that it was exactly the same as singing. And when my voice slipped and then finally broke, I was left with the voice I had left with was my oboe. So that's what, and it's exactly the same range as a boy treble, exactly the same range. And so I sort of feel that singing is I sing with the instrument. It sings from me. That's really how even when I'm playing the most contemporary, most extreme, most virtuosic piece, I'm still always trying to sing with the instrument, even if it's very, very, very fast and crazy. I'm still trying to make it sing. And when I did the Elliott Carter concerto, and Carter was listening in, and I did it at the proms, and you can actually see it on YouTube on my YouTube channel, which is N Daniel Music. This fantastic piece, but very, very complex. And he just said everything must sing, make it sing. So I thought, yeah, that's just up my street. So luckily that's kind of how it all started, and it's been very good to me. It's such a funny thing. I call it puffing down a twig, because that's basically what you're doing. Because the reed is actually made in very good wine growing areas. It's not necessarily combined with wine and reed making, but in very good winemaking areas like California, you can get very good reed cane, and of course south of France, Spain, Israel, Hungary, Argentina. And the cane is called Arundo donax, and it just grows in the water. You see it all over California in the watery areas. So we make those reeds ourselves. It's a long, boring process I won't tire you with, but yeah. But it's actually reed cane that grows in water that you turn into this thing that crows and makes a sound, and then that makes the sound of the oboe.
So while we're there, my first and only rude question. I knew an oboe, a family, and the 2 kids that I knew were an oboist and a bassoonist. And they always seemed to me to smell kind of funny, and I thought that was because they were always making reeds and had all that rope and stuff. Is there anything to this? Am I just? I need to get over this. You don't smell funny, eh?
I invite anybody to come and sniff me. I smell good.
Okay, that puts that one to rest. Now let's see what
Gemma Malone is my goddess.
When I stop blushing, we'll be able to continue. So we understand something about that your career really as an oboist began at about the age of 18. If I got that right, the competition and so on.
Yeah.
And so now, then we're going to deal with the program. I've got to keep track of time here, but I'm curious about when does that other thing as a clarinetist cum slash conductor. When does that other thing called, ooh, I'd like to stand up in front of some people and make some music, when did that hit, conducting?
Well, it was comparatively recently, I suppose about 10, 15 years ago. Basically, I'd always thought that it might be something I wanted to do, but I resisted it very, very strongly because I felt that it was probably just my ego talking and that I should be satisfied with what I've got, and commissioning pieces is such a great thing to do. I've commissioned hundreds of pieces from different composers. It's really a major repertoire for the future. So I thought maybe that's enough. And then somebody asked me to conduct something with a recording for them, and I just felt as though I'd suddenly got the wind beneath my wings, and I've been developing it. It's quite hard in a way because I still fight that thing of worrying that that there's a sort of ego side of it, and it's just such an English thing to say, I know. But the thing is, I really want to remain true to my musical principles, and it's quite hard to do it unless you're prepared to kind of give up. People want me to give up the oboe to do it, and I don't want to do that. And I've seen a lot of very good musicians give up their instruments in order to conduct, and actually I would rather do it a different way if it takes a little longer. And I've got a lot to say with the instrument, and I find, more and more I find that my voice is my singing voice, my instrumental voice is my singing voice, and I can't do without it. So I'm just, working away, doing what comes up. I do some great conducting work and have some fantastic experiences and immerse myself in major masterpieces. But I tell you something, being an oboist is an awful lot easier than being a conductor for one very major reason. If you take maybe the most famous oboe concerto, perhaps the Strauss oboe concerto, how many times have you heard that piece?
I've heard it more than most, but not often.
Maybe 4 or 5 times?
Yeah.
How many times have you heard Beethoven's Seventh Symphony?
Yeah, here.
So when I walked on stage in Sweden, in Jönköping, to conduct Beethoven 7 for the first time, I walked, just about to walk on stage, I went, uh-oh, thinking about, Klemper, Haiti, rattle, a bardo, and the thing is, on the oboe, there are great antecedents of mine, but in a way, I have a bit more of an original hand, a bit more chance for the audience to believe me first time, rather than comparing it to their great recordings. Oboists will always compare; you can't get past them. But somehow, so what I've tried to do is add slowly to my conducting repertoire and try and be as truthful and authentic with that as I am with the oboe.
That's exactly what Joshua Bell has told me. He is also making this transition. He's doing a little more conducting with St. Martin in the Field, and he says essentially the same. I just saw him perform last week here in Santa Barbara with them, and he is functioning beautifully as a conductor from the chair.
Yes, exactly.
So I think he's moving in the same way perhaps you are, and of course
yes.
your level of musicianship as an oboist, it's a travesty. It's not to be allowed that you would just shove off into conducting.
Tell you another way in which I found it's helpful in terms of conducting and playing is that I've done a lot of teaching over my life, and I would describe myself as a very committed teacher. And somehow, when you're coaching or teaching, what I'm trying to do is to get the very best from people, to make them find their sound. And although when I conduct, I find my orchestras do have a sound, it's my sound, I want them to be themselves. I want them to be relaxed and be themselves. So helping people feel relaxed in that way, in a social way, I don't mean socially, but I mean in a social way inside an orchestra, is something I think I have a skill at. I think Josh is. I met him for the first time the other day. Our paths had never crossed, although I taught at Bloomington for a while, but it was after he left. But I really do admire him, because apart from anything else, he's not just gone in there, played a concerto, then stand up waving his arms. What he's done is he sits with the orchestra and directs from the violin, and he's learning a lot about the music from that. And it's a very successful collaboration. It's given that orchestra a whole new lease of life, I would say. I heard them without him actually last year when I was there, exactly a year ago, and that was also a great concert. Mm.
And I remember when Neville Mariner conducted the orchestra.
90
Completely,
years old this
you know.
week.
Oh, he too is still alive. Oh my God, there's hope for us all.
Conductors don't die easy.
Well, let's talk about the program here because time
Yeah.
is slipping by and people have such limited interest time. Justifiably, let's say, in this busy world. So the program is going to have two flute works, Thea Musgrave's piece, as we discussed, and Jake Heggie's piece. And I really want to hear a little bit more about the two oboe works, the oboe sonata of Herbert Howells, English composer, and this really enchanting trio, composed in 1968, I think. When everybody else was going through the Sturm und Drang of the Cold War, this literally, I hate to be corny, but walk in a country garden of Madeleine Dring's, this trio for flute, oboe, and piano. Go. Tell me about these two works.
Well, I'll talk about the Dring first, as you've mentioned it. Madeleine Dring was a singer and pianist. She used to sing while she played the piano herself. And so she wrote a large body of extremely beautiful songs. She was a pupil of Vaughan Williams, actually. And she had in common with Vaughan Williams that she was synesthetic, and that when she heard a key or a certain note, she would see colour. This is a very interesting subject to me. We'll talk about it more another time. But she was married, as it happened, to a very, very fine oboist, a man called Roger Lord, who's still alive now, and he was the first oboe of the London Symphony. And she wrote quite a few delicious, I mean, that's the best word for it, charming, delicious, tasteful, gorgeous little pieces, quite light, but always with a sweetness to them, and extreme harmonic beauty. She wasn't interested in Darmstadt or any of that stuff. She just did her thing. And some of the best composers sometimes are people who live outside their own time. You could say, actually, that the composers such as Herbert Howells, maybe Vaughan Williams, maybe even Britten, lived very successfully outside the time they were living in. There's a kind of oboist, it's a one Wilson, who was an incredible British oboist of the period, who Howells wrote the sonata for. He had so many pieces written for him, and many of these composers, I think of them as the romantic repertoire that the oboe has missing, because in the romantic era, the oboe was not a soloistic instrument. The piano, the violin, to a lesser extent the cello was, but particularly the piano, and larger forms dominated. And then with the oboe's sort of development, what happened was that composers realised with an artist like Goossens that they can have a very successful oboe and string orchestra, oboe string quartet, oboe piano, all these different formats. And so they wrote a lot. So I have a wonderful repertoire, some of which I've played in over there in California. The Bach's Quintet we played recently,
yes.
Another Goossens piece. And in fact, when I first came, this is my 7th season as a matter of fact, but when I first came, one of the first pieces I played for Camerata Pacifica was the Herbert Howells Sonata with Warren Jones. And I have to say that playing with Warren is just one of the most enjoyable things that you could do on a concert stage. It's like being carried it's like being on a hovercraft. You feel as if you're floating on a sound which is softer than a feather bed, and yet it's got incredible rhythmic strength. And he understood this piece. He came to love this piece. He learnt it for me. I'd played it for many years and had done the first recording of it back in the 80s when I was very, very young. The Howells is a huge piece. It's a 25-minute, 24-minute sonata in 4 movements, 2 connected and 2 connected. And it was written in London during the Blitz in 1942. It was never performed because Howells played it through with Goossens, and Goossens said, old boy, I think it needs a bit more work. Goossens was I would describe him as a very particular person. That's a word my husband uses. My darling, he's a very particular person. Yes, he was. I mean, he just had a very unique position. But the thing is, sight reading it would have been absolutely crazy because the piece is really, really substantial and very hard for both parties. Howells, of course, would have been able to play his own piano part most likely, but the oboe part would have been fearsome to sight read. So I think probably Howells, who was notoriously unconfident about his own music, and and probably just thought, oh well, I'll just put that away. And he wrote a clarinet sonata for Frederick Thurston 2 years later, which became very successful and has been played ever since. And then after Howells died, this piece was rediscovered as it's a long story how it came to be discovered, but I was sent it, and I just, from the first moment I put my hands on the piano and played the piano part through, before I even put the oboe in my mouth and played the oboe part, I just was crazy about the piece. It's one of my very, very favourite pieces. It's a huge journey, and it uses the piano in the most wonderful way, almost like an organ with very, very deep, rich pedal sounds. He's often reaching right to the left, all the way to the left to play the very bottom note of the piano. It's incredibly rich harmonic sound. The phrases are absolutely huge. Each musical sentence is the size of a movement of a Bach sonata, literally. It's huge, huge shapes. But it's a shape that works really well. There's a slow movement that he drew from a song he'd written much, much earlier, all about hanging garlands on doors. And I researched this. This idea of hanging garlands on doors is connected to illness and the Black Death. And when someone's died in the house, they used to think that it would ward off evil spirits and that the smell would take away from the smell of the dead. So this not just about Christmas. It's all about death and life and continuity in the colour green. And then there's this really, really powerful and very energetic, slightly jazzy almost, last movement, which links into a massive epilogue, which then ends somehow in the way you started. So you have this sense of circularity about the piece. And I love the way Warren described it when we talked about it. We did it about 3 or 4 times, and then he said, I'd like to introduce it tonight. I said, Warren, that's great, you talk about it. He described it as having a ball of string, and you go for a long, long journey with this ball of string, letting it out piece by piece. And when you come back to what you think the end of a journey, then you find the first piece of string you dropped in the first place. It's a beautiful way of describing it. It really is one of my most favourite pieces, and I think it's got a language that anybody would understand.
Excuse me. Also, there's a kind of an analogy, I think, if this was composed during the Second World War. When you said garland, the image in my mind was wreath, a black wreath, and in a way, kind of sort of the same thing imagery might have been in his mind as well in that time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, it's going to be such a joy to play the Mozart piano and wind with Warren as well. And with my lovely colleagues, and in fact, I've discussed and have suggested to Adrian a new colleague in the French horn department, and this is my compatriot, Mr. Martin Owen. And Martin is just. Last time I saw him, he was playing first horn for a year with the Berlin Philharmonic, and he's principal horn of the BBC Symphony Orchestra, and he's just played Thea Musgrave's Horn Concerto live on the radio in London, and Thea was there for that. So he's got the Thea Musgrave stamp of approval as well, but he's a wonderful player, lovely man. I've known him for many years, and he's someone I feel really comfortable playing on a stage with. With Camerata, the name in a way says it all. We're all good friends, and so it's helpful for us to know somebody to bring them in. And he's just a wonderful person, a wonderful player, most beautiful sound, warm sound. I'm sure my beloved audiences there are going to like him very much. He's a nice guy.
And this is his first performance with Camerata?
It is.
Aha! Nice. Thank you for the scoop. I'm the last one to hear it. Let's see. Let me just see what we're missing because we're running a little tight here. Let's see. We have spoken about the Madeleine Dring work, the trio for flute, oboe, and piano.
Just to say one more thing about that is that the slow movement of that Madeleine Dring has one of the best tunes in all of 20th century music. It's seriously great tunes, beautiful, great fun to play it together. Yeah, we haven't talked about Jake Heggie's lovely piece. And of course,
I understood that to be for something else, for flute and piano.
It is.
Okay, but you want to talk about it? Please do.
Aren't I allowed to talk about flute? What's so wonderful about the Jake Heggie piece is it was written in memory of a lady called Suzanne Malouk, and she was the sister of Lucy Jansen, she and Richard Jansen are great supporters of the arts in Santa Barbara, and very, very dear friends of mine. And it's a wonderful thing that this piece exists, because unfortunately between its commissioning and its first performance, Suzanne died. So it's a piece that means a lot to Lucy and a lot to Adrian and to any of those of us who love Lucy and Richard. So it's a very special piece. And Narcissus is a piece of madness, because
This is Thea Musgrave. Let's remind everyone. This is Thea Musgrave's piece.
Yeah, she was 85 now. She must have written this maybe 20 years ago. And it's a piece where the flute player has a set of foot pedals, and it you have to. There's a sort of special setup with a computer, so that you can play something with your foot on the pedal, and then it repeats. It becomes like a background. If anybody's seen that, the latest techniques of this are, you can see somebody. There's a guy on a trombone doing it with a song, a pop song at the moment, and you can see that on the internet. It's just trombone on a loop.
And let me jump in. We Americans saw that just a couple of nights ago. I, by accident, The Tonight Show. Somebody, a famous jazz pianist or something, or singer, and the host, and they did their little loops on their the flat screen.
If you Google Vida La Loca Coldplay trombone on a loop, if you Google that, you'll find this guy doing it. It's exactly the same technique. But of course, Thea's piece is done with such massive integrity, and it's all about Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection, and therefore was the gods in anger and laughter turned him into the flower that we know as a narcissus, which is exactly from this time of year in this part of the world.
That's sweet. Bit of programming coincidence, or not?
Narcissus.
Yeah. By the way, is this another Adrian Spence kind of programming, or did you have some input?
Well, the only input I had was that in the very first program I did for Camerata Pacifica, which was a 2-interval marathon of about 3 45-minute halves, all featuring me. I was just kind of my audition for the group, really. I suggested that we did the Howl Sonata and gave him my recording of it. And he, of course, has always remembered that piece and how much people loved it. I mean, I just remember in Ventura, which is a wonderful audience as well. There's a lot of people just stood up when they heard the end of that piece. It's just so beautiful, and I think it's just he's remembered it. And this season, to an extent, from Adrian is remembering some favourite moments from past seasons. No, it's totally his work. I mean, we can suggest pieces to him, but in a way I agree with his way of programming, which is it needs to be no kind of democracy. Actually, it needs to be absolutely singular vision, and then it's like him, it's love it or don't love it. It's absolutely clear that he has incredibly original programming ideas. There are some of the programs I've looked at and just wondered how they would work, and then you hear them, you go, well, that's just crazy and brilliant. And this is another one that, I mean, I know this is going to work beautifully because I know some of the pieces, I've heard them together before, like the Dring and the Howls, but I think it's going to be a brilliant program. And then having the Mozart at the end, which is such a celebratory piece in so many ways. And it's a piece that Mozart, of course, himself wrote to his father and said, this is the best of me. And when you have Mozart saying, you know what, I think I've done a good one here, Dad, it's like, okay, this piece we have to enjoy.
And I read that as I was prepping last night, as I was listening to just the opening bars of the quintet, of that quintet, and you instantly go, oh, this is a good one.
There's something, to me, there's something very celebratory about it, and I don't know, I always feel it's got something about wedding. It feels like wedding. There's so many times that you hear church bells in the piece. And of course, the old cities in Europe, they still now, they have incredible church bells. And it's got that feeling to me. And there's some thought that it was just after he married Constanza, or that we know it was just after he married Constanza. But I think there's something about it. And of course, in Britain here this weekend, we're celebrating that same-sex couples can marry for the first time and be equal to everybody else. So we're kind of celebrating marriage in every way at the moment. So it's on my mind. Maybe that's where the idea came from.
No wonder you're hearing wedding bells and church bells. And marvelous.
Yeah, probably.
And we were referring to the Mozart quintet, the quintet for piano and winds on this program. We're going to have to leave. I would love. We'll talk again on other subjects because I have met a Hollywood composer, a young woman. I've forgotten her name just now. Who is, what is that again? Synesthetic or whatever?
Synesthetic, yeah.
Synesthetic. Thank you for correcting me.
It's a very useful thing to be for a film composer because you can
Fascinating.
actually copy what you see on the screen in certain ways.
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah. So it's a fascinating subject all by itself. But you're telling me that Herbert Howells, this piece is green. Yeah, something like that.
You know, luckily it's not my bag, but Madeline Dring was synesthetic, and so was Vaughan
Madeline.
Williams.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it was Madeline.
So was Ravel, his teacher.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Absolutely.
They kept it quiet, apparently. Let's see. We're done. Let me give the phone number for Santa Barbara ticket sales. This is Hahn Hall, the glorious chamber hall in Santa Barbara, on the Music Academy of the West Campus. You can't go wrong on that one. We're talking about there are 4 engagements throughout Southern California, so look at your local TV guides or something. But we're talking in Santa Barbara on Friday, April 11th. 1 in the afternoon for a sort of mini performance, and then at 7:30 the full concert that we've been talking about. Wonderful, wonderful concert. And the telephone number to call if you're going to take a trip up to Santa Barbara or if you need more information about the other venues, Pasadena, Los Angeles, and Ventura. The telephone number at the Camerata Pacifica office is area code 805-884-8410. Nicholas Daniel, thank you for allowing me into your home at whatever it is.
To come back. I just so love coming there, and I mean, Camerata is just my #1 chamber priority of anything I do anywhere, and the audiences are also my major priority. It's just a very special group of people to play for. Thank you so much.
Indeed, world-class music making, as I say ad nauseum, but very true. Thank you very much indeed. I'll see you in a week or so.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.